All right, Lori, I got a question the other day that I thought would be kind of fun to play with. And that was, what do we mean by X when we talk about deep human X? And of course, the question was related to, are you talking about porn? Uh, but but I figured it was probably worth bringing up and talking about. So, how would you guide me to answer that question?
Well, I actually love this. Part of, when I think about X, first and foremost, since we've been in technology forever, X is how you write experience, which is talking about how the human experience is for the people who are using software. So that's one interpretation of X. But I think you and I, when I think about when we were creating the company and what we want to achieve in this world, is it's that we want individuals to really find their own passion and through understanding their own patterns, find their own, find what lights them up, and then use technology to help them achieve making that part of their lives. And so when we talk about deep human X, right, it means we want you to really think about who you are and who you're being. And if you think of X like in terms of algebra, right? X is a placeholder for a number that is yet to be defined depending on the equation or the formula, right, that you're trying to get to. And so Chad and I have not talked or agreed on this, but that's kind of where I think is that it allows us to say, hey, whatever's important to you, that's what X should be, right? It's about really embracing your humanism and who you are and what lights you up. And that X is just a placeholder for whatever it is that you think.
I like it. I was horrible at algebra, and I still have nightmares about algebra. This is why my undergrad was English, for sure. But I like that explanation, right? Because one of the things that we toyed with was that concept of the number one before X, right? It's just understood, right? It's one of those things that is just there, even though it's sometimes not delineated in an equation or it's not, put in place. And I think, as we were working on this, for me, the thing I liked about X was the tongue-in-cheek piece of it, because we're both Gen Xers. We're both extremely sarcastic and skeptical, and all of the things that Gen Xers were. Did you ever, going real Gen X? Did you ever remember? You remember Reality Bites, the movie Reality Bites with Winona Ryder, or Breakfast Club? Like, these were
X to have liked it.
Yeah, yeah. These were the things that kind of that attitude. Is something that I wanted to make sure we embodied in the company, but also I think that space, right? Give space for it to change and not be so definitive about it, because I think dependent upon, some people may have heard the concept of everybody wears different masks or have different uniforms. Like, you can do it with clothes. Like, I wear different clothes when I ride the Harley than when I go to the golf course than when I'm at, the marina. It's the same kind of thing. I think for us, when we're doing this, is like
bougie, the way you just described that.
It did sound bougie. I did not mean that to sound bougie. But okay, let's be real clear. The Harley is 8 years old. The golf clubs are 10 years old, and the marina, I don't have a boat. So let's be real clear. Fair though. Fair. It did sound bougie. Which, as we all know, is, I'm what does my brother call it? I'm white trash bougie. Like, I'm just there's certain things that I'll spend a lot of money on. But when you think about, like, in business, I think everybody talks about these human skills that are going to be so important for people to work on and upskill and evolve in themselves. It's going to be different for everybody. And it's going to even go one step further. It's going to change based on their context, based on, am I trying to be relevant in this team meeting? Am I trying to be relevant in this board meeting? Am I trying to be relevant in this one-on-one coaching this coaching session? Because I'm not a big fan of one-on-ones, but this coaching moment, am I going to be able to be relevant? I think the X leaves room for you to do that self-analysis and definition, unless I'm missing something.
No, I love that. That's how I feel too, right? If you, there's a theory by Dr. Ron Heifetz at Harvard that talks about the difference between technical and adaptive leadership, where for years it's been, if you know these skills, then you can direct people to do it. But that is just not going to hold up in the next, we're seeing a lot of it crumble in the world, but we're also seeing that the adaptiveness of humans, which is, by the way, our number one strength for survival, right, is going to really be needed. So that placeholder of, right, whatever is deep human to you is what is going to be what you fill in the X of who are you in this meeting, right? Like you mentioned, right? That is a lot of choice and power that many of us in today's workplace don't feel, right? You feel the constraints of what the organization wants and the goals and the culture and all these unspoken rules. And part of what we want to do is like break apart, not tear them down, but just open up your thinking a little bit to be like, well, if none of the circumstances change, how can I show up in this meeting different, right? How can I be different? And the answer to what different is really deeply human, and it's up to each individual. So I like that idea of, right, really it being, it's personal. It's what you want. It's what you find is the deep human part of you that likes to grow and is curious and gets inspired. And it's the things that you do, right, that you might do when you're having beers with your friends, or how you're being there, right, when you're in your more natural state. It's like, how do we really open up just the thinking to give ourselves possibilities of being different, not doing different work, just showing up as a different human being.
And I think it's going to be interesting because everybody, of course, everybody's on the AI bandwagon, but some of these things that we're talking about are things that have been happening long before, not before AI. Like AI has been around a while, but some of these things have been happening in the business trends that we've seen. Is that crumbling of that industrial, do what I say, I'm going to tell you what to do, and people being willing to do it. Not as many people are as willing to do it anymore. And then you have this divide between, okay, if you're not willing to do it, then what I really need to talk about is, hey, I need this outcome. And then the question becomes, do you have the interpersonal skills and the skills necessary to figure out how to achieve that outcome without that kind of direction? It was it was very much for me towards the latter half of my leadership and executive career. Kind of the way I approached the teams was like, hey, we got to get here. And I don't know, help figure this out. Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do, because if I could tell you what to do, then we wouldn't need, that person on the team. Like we're all better as a group than we are as individuals, but there's still a skill set. And what that skill set is that somebody has to develop, that awareness that they have to develop, or the thinking or communicating effectively, emotionally, and empathically in business. It's going to be different for everybody. And so we didn't want to be prescriptive, because, everybody says, pick your niche, like do this thing. Okay, well, yeah, sure. We could have doubled down and said, okay, it's deep human emotional intelligence, or it's deep human flow. But it isn't that, in my experience and in my mind, it isn't that rigid. There's so many things that go into it.
Well, people often say to us, but what is it you're doing? Is it kind of like design thinking? Is it kind of like cognitive, psychology? Is it kind of like neuroscience? Is it kind of, is it all these things? And the answer, is it kind of like UX design? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
It's all of those things. It's all bits and pieces, but how it comes together for you is different. And that's where, it's amazing if we think about the, 300 million years that our brain has been evolving, right? Humans have only been around for a short time of that, but it is adaptation and really relying on the ability to assess a situation and either develop skills or use skills in your toolbox that you have. And I think what we're trying to create is a way to say that logic and analytics, look, if those are the things that motivate you, there's no reason to want to even think about operating or looking at business differently, because that has been the hammer that has been used for every problem for probably the past 100 years, right? But because AI is presenting a choice and an opportunity in time, like this is a changing point, right? What we have the opportunity now is to look back at some of our human skills that, our ancestors, 10,000 years ago were using, right? Like, let's look at more than just logic and analytics and being worried about, only doing things one way, and instead say, hey, we actually can look at the vast unknown, and we can use our human tools inside of us to actually, right, find our grounding and walk that rocky pathway as we're uncovering stuff. And we might find out that there's whole new ways that we'd never thought of, that would never, things that were never possible to humans before, because of the way the circumstances are right now.
Yeah. Well, and think about like that. Go back to that question. Like, we get asked a lot. Well, is this what you're trying to do? Is that what you're trying to do? And what people are looking for when they ask that question is for us to give them an answer in a paradigm they are used to. And so it takes a conversation to explain that, look, we both have probably more experience in business than we want. We both have worked for very large organizations. We've run our own businesses. We've worked for small organizations. We've interacted with some of the largest brands on the planet or been a part of them. Like, I understand why you want me to tell you where it fits into the existing paradigm you're used to. But for us, it's the opportunity that, you know what, we're going to take not just our experience or our education, but the 25 years of therapy and the countless self-help books or seminars that we went to, or the countless yoga things that we're into. And we're pulling pieces from each of those and putting them through a filter that helps us figure out, okay, if I were to design a company that's going to be successful for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, what would it look like? And what would be the skills that would be necessary? Because the 6 skills we've started in phase 1 or season 1, whatever we want to call it, that's not all of them. Those are just some that are going to be the most critical, kind of foundational. There'll be another ring to the model as we put it together. And that's what the X is for. We're not being as prescriptive as you do it this way, and then you do this, and then you do this. It's that I keep going back to you use the phrase lessen the define. It is about lessening the define. We know where we need to be. The question becomes now, how do we get there? We have the only thing you can change is yourself. It starts there. So if you can't figure out what those skills are, and you don't have a clear path to up level them in a way that's going to make you what we call relevant in business, or driving the impacts as things change around you, we've got a path. We're working on that. Like, we've got a starting point. I don't want to say a path. We've got a starting point for you, because the journey never ends. And that's kind of what the X is for. It's like bringing all of that stuff together in the recipe.
And I love that you talked about lessening the define, right? And that means having to not have one solution, one defined linear roadmap, because we are complex human beings who are very artistic. Whether you think you're an artist or not, if you are a human being, your mind is creating masterful scenarios all the time, right? And so what we are feeling is, hey, we know we have the destination of creating positive systems of change for humanity, right? That's our destination. What we're trying to live and breathe here and open up the opportunity for all of us, right, is to say that road may not be linear. It might look like a windy mountain. It might look like walking along a river, right? The journey is going to change. And as long as we're keeping our eye on where we want to go, we don't have to actually have everything defined. Can I share with everyone kind of what some of the struggles you and I had last week about our relationship with work?
Sure.
Okay. So Chad and I both had these funny moments where we know we're progressing. We know we're getting great feedback. We know, right, that we're doing what is making us, happy, and at the same time, really trying to make a difference. And we both had this thing where, gosh, work is so negative, and it's like such a bad connotation because it's filled with activities that, yes, while that gives you a short, dopamine pump in the time, and you get to cross off your list or check off your box or whatever it is, however you organize in your head, while that's great, the actual outcome of that work doesn't necessarily mean you're any closer to your destination. And so we both had a day where we called it a thinking day, where we were like, holy cow, like it's not about doing. Sometimes it's just about actually taking a step back and let's look more holistically about ways we can go, rather than just, pumping stuff out for the sake of pumping stuff out. And it was a big breakup, I would say. For me, I know I had a little bit of grief around it, and I'm still going to be working through it. But it's a different way of thinking. But it is not something that human beings like haven't done our whole evolutionary path, right? It is the thing that we do. It's just that somehow or another we've gotten to where if every little moment isn't measured and tracked and has a specific activity, that we don't feel valuable. And part of being with X is hey, we want to change that. What's valuable to me is not the same as what's valuable to Chad. What's valuable to you is not the same as what's valuable to me, right? So let's leave that X open for, the deep human is what I value, just to kind of bring it back to what the X is.
Yeah. And I mean, you're right. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. And if we're being completely candid, there have been some really uncomfortable moments as we've gone through this evolution of building the company and even doing some initial work with some individuals and some teams. We've told you we're thinking in public, right? We're not going to have the perfect, neither one of us are going to sit here and say, this is how you have to do it. What we want to create is the space and the insights and access to the expertise where needed to achieve a much larger outcome than, hey, I did this many activities today and I sent this many emails and that's not what it's about. The problem becomes we've been doing that for so long. I was freaking out a little bit when it was like, hey, I just took a whole day and I didn't really do much but watch the river float by and think. But then on, yesterday, it was like, oh, all of these ideas and all these things and the fun kind of came back. But it's an uncomfortable process. And it's kind of like breaking a habit. I mean, at the end of the day, a very long, almost
muscle memory built habit.
Yeah, it's like look, I was a smoker for a lot of years, and I would say, a lot of people would tell you quitting smoking is the hardest thing that they've ever done in their life, and it's not easy. I mean, I had many attempts before I was successful. I would say this has been harder because it's almost more built into the scaffolding of just kind of how we approach not only business but life. Like,
Right.
hey, did I achieve X? Now, you're seeing people push in with more of that. Hey, I'm not willing to commute because I still want to work from home, or I'm not willing to do these things. And they're standing up for those things. And they're saying, hey, if that's what this organization needs, that's just not a fit for me. And that's fair. That is 100% fair. But then everybody has to deal with the reality that that may not be fair for you. That means you can't be part of that crew because that's the way that crew's going or that organization's going. That introduces a bunch of fear as well. And how you address that is part of the X. Like where are you at any given moment? Where do you want to go? And what's the decision as that relevance changes? What's the decisions you have to make? It's not going to be a straight line. No, I very rarely think it will be a straight line.
I mean, I'm just going to go back to our history of how many, of all the hundreds of thousands of projects you've been part of, how many actually, met the plan that was laid out initially.
Nowhere near the number that should have, right? And that was actually, that was part of our frustration when we first started talking, was like, I was extremely frustrated having worked with very large organizations or medium-sized organizations that were seemingly committed to make a change, but didn't want to do the work that was necessary, didn't want to put in the effort. Let's not use the word work. They didn't want to put in the effort that would be required to drive the change as the organization is currently structured. And so you end up with this, not the types of impacts or outcomes that you were hoping for that got you excited to do it in the first place. And then it slides back into that, oh, this is work, and it becomes drudgery and a grind. And I was fed up with it. I was just kind of over it because, after many years of trying to help organizations pull that off and trying many different attempts, I kind of came to the realization that it wasn't anything that we were trying. It was the structure and way that the organization was set up, that it's almost set up to resist change.
It's 100%. It's right. It's risk adverse, and we've come like that. But we see it around the world today with the divide and the uncomfortableness that people are feeling. And I think if we really look at human history, we just see this as a pattern of, right, change is already coming. All this discomfort is just a sign that change is here. We had the pandemic, right? Now we have AI coming, right? Like we've had some really good prompters maybe, or accelerators to say, nope, now's the time to change. What we want to really open here with X is that with the X and the DeepHumanX is to say, hey, all of that's okay. And without changing, again, any of your circumstances, at least start changing your thinking of realizing that you aren't actually tied. You have choice, even in the matter of, even if you're staying in a company that the system is completely risk adverse and you feel like you have no power, you can actually change your thinking to empower yourself to then do a better assessment of, is this the right environment or not for me? And we're just hoping by reminding everybody of, you know, the human operating system, the patterns that we all run anyways, that you can remember that your current way of thinking is just your thoughts. It's not actually you. And that by understanding some of the patterns, you can actually start creating new things to fill that X up with that do bring you joy and some comfort internally, even if all the circumstances aren't exactly what you want for the moment.
Right. And we were very clear when we started putting the company together that as part of that exit was, you know, we could we could have very easily gone down the, hey, let's create a self-help guru company kind of, you know, woohoo kind of feel good. But we really wanted to say, okay, look, we want to take the good things from the areas on self-awareness and being present and mindfulness, all of these things that have often been thrown around in business kind of in a way that almost devalues them, the way that they're presented. Kind of,
Messages.
yeah. Yeah. Right. And we want to bring those together because we all know and we believe wholeheartedly that it starts with you. It starts internally. You can sit back and rage at the sea all you want, but the waves are going to keep coming. So all you can do is change your position. Right. So it starts there. But as we do this, the journey with us will also introduce you to some of these tools, give you hands-on practice, allow you to experiment with them. We're going to combine the two. I mean, everybody in their families out there training people on how to use the tools, and that's great, but that isn't the answer in our opinion. It's a combination of that self-enhancement plus the application and augmentation with the tools. So we're going to teach you the tools, but we got to start with us, and where that starts is an individual's. It's your decision. It's your choice on where you feel like you need the most work. So we didn't want to be prescriptive. And the X leaves us room to drive that individual interpretation of what makes the most sense for you. Is that fair?
That's fair. I think that's a good summation of what DeepHumanX is really about, kind of where our thinking is. And if you're not looking for the avenues, right, the direct linear pathway, but you're interested in the conversation and interested in finding out and exploring a little bit more about you and what can make, you know, bring happiness in your life, in the workplace, this is the right place to continue listening.
Yeah. Welcome to the playground, everybody. We look forward to hanging out with you.